In this episode of Balancing the Christian Life, we talk to Benjamin Lee about the importance of mindset. Welcome to Balancing the Christian Life. I'm Dr. Kenny Embry. We'll talk about how to be better Christians and people in the digital age. Let's go. You probably know some people who impress you with what they're able to get done in the same number of hours in the day that you have. Benjamin Lee is like that for me. He is an evangelist in Texas and someone I have admired for a long time. Benjamin has 2 podcasts, including the I Can Do podcast. In that podcast, he often talks about how to be more successful. He has interviewed some interesting people and done an excellent job of giving practical advice. If you follow him on Facebook, he often shows inspiring photos of his workouts and tries to help people pursue the things which would make them better. I must admit, he even inspired me to start walking the neighborhood with my wife. It's become something we both enjoy. I wanted to talk to Benjamin about both fitness and mindset because he knows a lot about both. Also, notice what he has to say about the importance of failure. I think you'll be just as impressed as I am. How you doing, Benjamin?
I am doing great. Thanks for having me on, Kenny.
Oh, thank you. One of the things I know is that you talk about the physical well-being of Christians. How do you think being physically fit helps your spiritual fitness?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kenny. I do post quite a bit on Facebook about this.
Yeah.
For me personally, fitness, and I know we're going to talk about this in a little bit, it's been a part of my life for a really long time. So being a preacher, I've preached now for the past 12 years.
Wow.
So being physically fit has been a great benefit. Number one, just for the energy.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of energy when you think about studying consistently, when you think about preaching. And so being physically fit, exercising, I see it really as like an investment. And so it helps me with what I'm doing with respect to teaching and preaching. It's also a great way, I like to say that it's a great antidepressant. It's a great way to relieve stress. And so when you think about being a preacher, there's a lot of stress that comes with this kind of job or career. So for me, that's how, or at least a couple of ways that it helps me with respect to preaching.
I understand that. I wish I was more fit myself. Most people who come to a really good physical fitness regimen usually has a story behind it about why they went down that road. Mm-hmm. What is your story behind physical wellness?
Yeah, I can remember living on Philo Road in Urbana, Illinois. I had this small little bench press in my bedroom. I've always been interested in fitness and working out and exercising. I tried to run in high school, Kenny. I was not the fastest by any means at all. But even in high school, my junior and senior year, I ran cross country. Yeah. So that really gave me a love for getting out and running. And by the way, I got smoked in my junior and senior year. These freshmen, they're running like a 15-minute or less 3-mile race. I'm like, man, what is happening? And I'm just trying to survive. But it was actually really fun. And so it gave me discipline and learning how to set goals and can I get better? My mom was a massage therapist for a number of years. And so I had that connection with the body as well. So I went to the University of Illinois after I graduated high school. And I majored in kinesiology, which is the study of human movement. So I've always had some connection. I worked with Pfizer Pharmaceuticals, so I've been interested. I worked with them from 2001 to 2009. Well, I've always been interested with how the body works. How can I be healthy? How can we get even more healthier and things like that? Really, the last 12 years or so, my why has changed quite a bit. So I have a heart condition. It's called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, or HCM. And so it's a hereditary condition. So I have a part that is enlarged, and I got diagnosed with that in 2006 or 2007. Then in 2010, I ended up getting a implantable cardioverter defibrillator, an ICD. Okay. And so I did that really for preventative measures in case I ever go into some kind of fatal rhythm. You'll see on my Facebook page and my blog, I Can Do, and that really came from that acronym ICD, because that was a big blow to me, because it was 2010 when I got that. Once you get that changes everything. So I have this small device in my chest. So I was 30 at the time. And so that just gave me a lot of perspective as well with how am I going to handle this situation? I can look at it as a negative, or I can try to turn it into something positive. And so that's where this I can do mindset really came about. And for those who aren't watching the video here, that's why I have so much Iron Man stuff behind me that Kenny can see. I'm a big Iron Man fan. We have that in common, at least. It's something in our chest. But I also had another cardiovascular event in 2014. I had a clot in my right coronary artery, and I was actually working out at the time. And so that changed my perspective even more. So for me, exercise is something that I really enjoy. I love doing it. And it's also something that's beneficial for me with my work and, Lord willing, hopefully being here and being strong for my family. Every day is another opportunity to get a little bit stronger, get a little bit faster, get a little bit better.
Yeah, I understand. You said this is something you enjoy. Have you always enjoyed this?
Certainly, there are moments. I think about cross country, for example. There are moments when you're doing those runs, and I tried to run track as well. I ran the 800 meters, and those workouts get really tough. But I think I can say, for the most part, I love to sweat. I love the feeling that it gives me, the energy that it gives me. I'm not running as much anymore. I've been doing a lot of walking, but I think I can say pretty confidently, I really do enjoy it. It's another opportunity to get outside, lifting weights for me.
Yeah.
It is fun. So yeah, I really do enjoy it.
You also preach.
Yeah.
You're also a Christian life coach.
Mm-hmm.
What are the skills that you think most Christians miss or maybe devalue when they focus solely on a spiritual walk rather than a holistic way of looking at their lives?
I think it's always important to understand, and I know you would agree with this as well, that our spiritual walk is always going to be the most important thing that we should be focusing on. I think about 1 Timothy chapter 4 and verse number 8, where Paul said, "For bodily discipline is only of little profit, but godliness is profitable for all things, since it holds promise for the present life and also for the life to come." And I understand sometimes people post that on Facebook. We start posting a lot about exercise and things like that. So there is a little value to it, but we should be focusing primarily on our spiritual walk. As I thought about this, Kenny, being a preacher, and I've heard this from a lot of people, preachers often are warned, don't lose your family because of the work. And that sounds a little bit weird for someone who may not be preaching or maybe understand all of this. How could a preacher lose his family teaching the gospel? You know, how could a preacher lose his family doing something that is so good and beneficial? And the challenge for some of us at times can be, there can be such a intense focus, which is really good, but then other things get left by the wayside. There is a balance where we do need to be focusing on our spiritual growth. Add to your faith, as Peter talks about in 2 Peter chapter 1. And so I think that's one of the challenges sometimes, where we can lose sight of the family time that we need, the time that we need to invest in our physical health, so that we can do even more kingdom work. That's a challenge that I think sometimes we can have. I think some of this as well is organization, time management, not just for preachers, but for people in general, right? When you think about coaching, and a lot of people, we know all the answers to the questions.
Yeah.
The challenge is just following through with the things that we know. So the challenge is, don't just be hearers of the word, but doers of the word. So we know this idea, the fruit of the Spirit is self-control, and we are to have this discipline, but so much of this is following through. I think sometimes we can lose sight of, there are things we still have to take care of, which all I think fit holistically with what you were saying with our spiritual walk, where we're to be good stewards of the things that we have.
I think preachers have a very hard job. I think one of the things that happens to you guys, and I am really gratified that you talked about preachers that lose their families. I think that is a very real problem, because I think we've all watched it. Why does that happen? Because I think on the surface, we would all say, oh, we pay him to be in the Bible all the time. So we're going to pay him to be in the Bible all the time. He should be quite possibly the most spiritual among us. My guess is you understand this better than most, because this is part of what you do. Why does that happen?
I think we could say there's a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
Number one, we may not always take the warning seriously. Pride can
Yeah.
get in the way. I've heard that, I've seen it, but I have it all under control.
Yeah.
Number two, it's great to be passionate. It's great to be zealous. We're talking about something that is so rewarding and satisfying, seeing a soul being converted to Christ, teaching the truth, teaching the gospel, really being involved where you're sowing the seed, changing lives, changing
Yes.
families, changing communities,
Yeah.
which is great. But at the same time, so hyper focused on that. And I know guys that have had to take sabbaticals because of health. I know of one where it's a great thing, but you just keep pressing and pressing. So for me, I've been preaching for 12 years. So my wife, Nikki Lee, she's been on
Yes.
your show, and I appreciate that. And I know she does as well. When we got married, she didn't marry a preacher. I was not preaching full time. I was working with Pfizer
Yeah.
Pharmaceuticals. So there's so many different changes that can happen. And so really trying to be balanced. I do think at times there is a lot of pressure where you have to be, it can be a 24/7 kind of job or career if not careful. So this is where time management, boundaries. When I was with Pfizer, my office was my
Yeah.
car. I'm in my car most of the day with my laptop and my equipment and all these samples and all these kinds of things. So when I'm done, for the most part, when I walk into the house,
Yeah.
I'm done, unless I have some computer work. But with preaching, it's always there. There's always something that I can do, or a phone call or something like that may come up. I do think sometimes we can lose sight of that. We can lose focus on that because we're not really maybe even taking the proper approach that, okay, preachers have to take some days off in the week. So figuring out, okay, here's when I'm going to work my hours. Here's what my schedule is going to look like. And then here's where I'm going to take a day or 2 days off. And so that can become really challenging as well, balancing that. So I think I think there's a variety of factors. And the scary thing about this, the challenging thing about this is that it can happen before
Yeah.
you even know it. So my son Joshua just turned 10 years old. We have a limited amount of
Yeah.
time. So for the past year or so, I have not done any gospel meetings, and I had some reasons behind that. But for preachers getting to a point where we can say, listen, maybe we slow down for a year. Maybe we don't do any meetings for a year. Maybe we say no to extra Bible studies. As much as I love online Bible studies, and I think about the pandemic last year, I was telling Nikki about this. My mindset, Kenny, last year when the quarantine first began was I want to make sure that when I look back at this, that I took advantage of this time, this extra time, which I think I did, but I think I also missed something. And I think what I missed was, and it wasn't, I don't think it's anything super big, but it is the more I think about it. What if I just said, you know what, we're quarantined. I'm just going to work on getting a full 8 hours of sleep every day.
Yeah.
But my mindset was on, I'm going to keep creating. I'm going to keep recording. I'm going to keep interviewing and things like that. Or, okay, we're quarantined. Let's just focus on what we can do as a family. And we have implemented some things like that. So I think sometimes even preachers can lose sight of what success is all about. It's not just with these platforms, with our podcasts, with social media, even with the amount of Bible studies that we do, because we have to have energy to study with our families. And we have to have the energy to be present when we're at home, you know what I mean, with our families. And so that's it. That's the scary thing about being a preacher. I think at times we can lose sight where we can say the work is important. It absolutely is important. There's a lot of people that are relying upon us. That also includes our family.
One of the things that I think it's the old cliche, the cobbler's children have no shoes. You are in a profession where you are often dealing with people's personal lives, and their personal lives don't happen on business hours. And so it's hard for us to recognize, Benjamin, we pay him to do these things for us. So he should rearrange his schedule so that he can accommodate me. I'll go ahead and say it again. I think you guys have one of the hardest jobs out there. It's hard for us to recognize what you guys do when you're not in a pulpit, because the most visible thing of what you do is preaching a sermon. And I would be willing to bet most of your time is not spent preaching or preparing for a sermon. there's a lot of stuff that we don't see that you see in aggregate, but there are a lot of pulls on your time. And if you're not able to set boundaries, I think that can be very dangerous, because it's that idea of expectations. Everybody expects you. Does that make sense, Benjamin?
No, it makes perfect sense. And I think it's important too for the listeners to understand preachers, if they don't understand this when they go into it, eventually they do. And it is a choice. It's a daily choice where I know some guys who are no longer preaching full time.
Yeah.
Some brethren may have a certain view about that, but I think that's okay.
Yeah.
And I think there's wisdom and understanding, you know what, this may not be the best path for me to go. I think about Acts chapter 18, where it appears Paul slowed down a little bit. He was in the synagogues on the weekends. He was pitching tents with Priscilla and Aquila, and then he devoted himself completely to the word again.
Yeah.
So I do think there's wisdom, really understanding. And for me, Kenny, my journey has been totally different than most other men who preach the gospel. So for me, I was working full time with Pfizer.
Yeah.
And we had moved to Columbia, Missouri. I got a job promotion. So the first year after we were there, the preacher left. And so they were looking for a preacher.
Yeah.
So for me, I started filling in. I had no idea how to write a sermon or anything like that.
Yeah.
I'm going to executableoutlines.com trying to figure out, okay, maybe this sermon will work and all this kind of stuff. And they were really patient with me. And some of those sermons were not the best with me trying to figure that out. So it was like me drilling for oil, where I was testing the waters. I think, okay, is this something that I would want to do? And before we had moved to Columbia, Missouri, we were in Rockford, Illinois. And so the preacher there was a big source of encouragement for me, just with studying and learning more about the scriptures. And so for me, I started off really not understanding even how to preach. And then I went to the preacher training program when I was 30 at Dowling Road. So that was a huge, that really fast forwarded things about 10 years with experience and learning. And, guys come in with different paths and things like that. So I've done it working full time, working with two other guys, with two preachers, and now being by myself. And so there's a lot of different things. There's a lot of different pros and cons that can come with that as well. So preachers need to be aware of what they're getting into. And I think communication with shepherds, helping them to understand, and the shepherds helping the preachers. Sometimes we need protection from ourselves. So for me, I got a cap. On how many gospel meetings I can do each year to 4, which is great, because in times past, I've dipped into my vacation time for gospel meetings. So I love my vacation time. I can't touch it now for gospel meetings. And that's very important for Nikki and for Josh and for me, just keeping that balance. So sometimes we need to protect ourselves from ourselves, really understand and making sure that things are balanced to be the most effective we can be for our families and for the congregation.
I completely agree. I think I'll be interested to see your answer to this. How would you define what success is now?
Yeah, that's a great question.
I thought so.
So there's so many different ways to define success. I was recently thinking about this statement, and I think I posted it on Facebook, success today. So when I think about success, I think something that we need to think about is staying in today, where we get so focused either on what's to come, which we do need to think and plan for, but we can lose sight of what actually we can accomplish today. So when I think about success, I think about, okay, am I here today? What can I actually get done today? And I think the quarantine, the pandemic last year, I know we're still going through it, but even last year that really helped me out with, there's only so much that I can control. When I think about success, I think we need to look at it first and foremost in a spiritual standpoint, or from a spiritual standpoint. I think one of the things to consider is just looking at the life of Jesus. If we look at, because you and I and others, we like to look at, okay, here's our list, or here's some things that we need to do, and what are we accomplishing? So I think that's what a lot of people consider when they think about success. And there's truth to that as well. So I think about Jesus. He woke up early in the morning in Mark chapter 1 to pray. He would often end his nights, like in Luke chapter 6, to pray. He was teaching the truth to others. He was preparing the apostles. All of those things, when I think about myself and you and others, that's a great way to measure, okay, what are we doing and what kind of seeds are we sowing and planting? And I think that's a great way to look at success. Are we drawing closer to our King on a daily basis? The other thought that I had was, are we following through with our commitments to ourselves? Certainly, obviously, we want to follow through with our commitments to God, but just some of the day-to-day things as well. Okay, so Kenny, if you said, I'm going to walk today, or I read from out loud Ecclesiastes chapters 1 and 2, because I said, okay, this is a goal. So I think that's a way to measure success. That's something that I think about. Am I following through with what I say I'm going to do? So Tuesdays and Fridays are when I play video games with my son for 1 hour. And that there's temptation to push that back or to delay it or even to cancel it because something comes up. So, well, that's a component with what I'm trying to do with him. That's a way that we can connect. It's something that he loves to do. So when I think about success, all the things that we accomplish in this world, the platforms we may build, if we don't have Christ, we're missing it. All those things are going to come up short and empty. So we need to make sure that we're, walking with him consistently. And then I would say following through with our commitments, the commitments we keep to ourselves. And I think that's interesting too, Kenny, where it's very easy to keep commitments that we have with other people. So you sent me this invite. We are recording at this time. I got here early because I want to follow through with that. I don't want to let you down. But why do we do that to ourselves? Have you ever done that where you say, okay, I'm going to do this, whether it's exercise or something that you need to do for yourself, and then something just comes in and it's gone. So following through with that, I think, is another way to measure our success.
And one of the things that you're doing there is you're really talking about immediate successes, which I really appreciate, because I think one of the things that happens, at least to me, look, I'm supposed to walk today, but I know I need to go fix this insurance thing. And I know I'm going to be on the phone probably for about 20 or 30 minutes because I'm going to be going through a phone tree of menus. And now I need to, I don't guess I'm going to be walking today. And we throw that away. I think another thing that you would probably recognize is we have those intermediate and also long-term successes as well. But those long-term and intermediate successes don't come unless you have those short-term successes. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's why there's something to this idea of success today. We have to follow through. Otherwise, you're exactly right. It'll be January 1st. We'll be in the exact same place. It's very easy to get stuck in the future. It can be a trap. Just the past can be a trap where we rest on our past success. I can't remember who I heard this from exactly, but maybe it was Kobe Bryant. I'm not for sure. But one of the greatest dangers to success is success. Because, all right, I was successful. I did it. Okay, but can you now do it again? Or I played games with my son Joshua 2 weeks ago. Okay, great. But it's that investment that we make. And so even thinking about the scriptures, we continue to read, we continue to dive into God, we continue to grow and to stay hungry for the truth. And so success today, just got to focus on today. Jesus talks about that in Matthew chapter 6, 33 and 34. So today is the hardest thing. We are not even promised tomorrow. So we just need to follow through on what we can do today. And that changes everything because today is manageable.
It reminds me of something, and I don't remember where I heard this. Somebody who said, we overestimate what we can do in a day and we underestimate what we can do in a year.
Yeah, Tony Robbins.
I think about when I try to schedule out my day, I think this will only take 10 or 15 minutes. And an hour and a half later, I'm still doing the same thing. And it's, no, this did not take 10 or 15 minutes. The day gets away from me so fast. Here's my problem, and I think you understand this, Benjamin. I have far more failures than I have successes. Flip that coin for me. Why is failure so important? And how do we mismanage our failure?
That's a great question. So when I think about failure, one of the challenges that we have, we don't like to fail. So if we want to try to flip the coin, failure is going to happen at some point in time. It's not to say that we are intentionally trying to fail, but we understand that there's a growth process. So next door, there's a little baby boy. His name is Charlie, and I saw him this morning. I was taking the garbage out, and him and his mom and his dad were walking out, and Charlie's just looking at me. I said, "Hey, Charlie, how you doing, little buddy?" And he falls to the ground. He's trying to walk, and it's so cute. But he
Yeah.
gets up. Okay, so he fell. He
Yeah.
got right back up. There's something there for us where we lose sight of this, where we feel like we have to get everything right the first time. And whoever does that, and you think about a career, I can remember when I was with Pfizer in the training program, which was so intimidating, Kenny, because they would record you
Wow.
with
Yeah.
one of the trainers. So they had the videos, and I had this blood pressure drug, and so we're like role playing. And I'm telling the doctor, just add this drug to your patient and what they're already taking. And they said, stop the camera, stop the film. He said, you can't say that. You'll kill the patient if you tell the doctor
Right.
to do that. Like, that's not going to be
Right.
healthy for the patient. So there's times where we're going to fail. So if we're going to flip the coin, we have to be realistic that not everything is going to go exactly the way that we
Right.
want it to go.
Yeah.
That's okay. So for you, so think about you. All right. Okay. I'm going to walk today, or I'm going to make my schedule today, but it's taking me 90 minutes. Oh, okay. You have to make a choice then. Is the day ruined? Or, all right, what can I
Yeah.
learn from this? And then what
Right.
can I do next? So you failed at some point. I think it's the idea of margin. And Greg McCowan in his book Essentialism talks about this, right? Where the GPS says it takes 30 minutes to get from point A to point B, add in 50% of that time. So leave and give yourself 45 minutes. That's how we can take away a lot of the failure. Maybe we need to be more realistic with our goals. So if we want to lose 20 pounds, maybe we just cut that in half, or say, you know what, I'm just going to shoot for 5. And that gives us a greater chance for success. So sometimes I think for us to flip the coin, we got to give ourselves the opportunity to be successful. Sometimes we set ourselves up to fail. I'm going to create this huge monumental goal, and I'm going to accomplish it. And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? Start with the baby steps, little by little. And I know it's not a parallel account, but I love the story in Exodus where God said, he's going to give the people the land. But he said, I'm not going to give it to you in a year. But he said, I'm going to give it to you little by little. And a lot of people today just aren't patient enough when it comes to whatever they're trying to accomplish. Failure is a part of life. And I think we understand we're not necessarily talking about sin per se, but even when we do come short and fall short in sin, there's a way that we get back up through confessing to God and repentance. And we continue on and making sure that we understand, okay, this is what happened. What can I learn from this experience? And even teaching our children about this. So today, Nikki dropped something in the kitchen and made somewhat of a mess. And I know she was frustrated. I remained silent. I didn't say too much, but I talked to Josh about it later. And I said, Mommy made a mess in the kitchen. And I'm not talking bad about her. He saw it. And I said, what did Mommy do? And he said, she cleaned it up. And I said, what did Mommy do after that? What do you mean? And I said, well, she kept going. She made a mistake. She cleaned it up.
Yeah.
And she kept going. And so I think for us, there is so much pressure. What if I fail? LeBron James is 4-6 in the NBA finals. So you can look at it two ways. He's a failure or he's a 4-time NBA champion.
Right.
Derek Jeter just got into the Hall of Fame. He batted 300? Somewhere around there. That's a lot of failing. That's a lot of failures on his part in a long career. So you could look at it as, well, look how many times I messed up or failed. Or you can say, I'm a Hall of Famer. So I think that's how we flip the script. And that's what we have to do. And that kind of goes into the mindset of how we view things or how we respond in those moments.
It's funny that's the direction you took. That's what I was just thinking about. I'm a college professor. One of the assignments that I have in one of my MBA courses is it's a simulation where students cannot succeed. I'm trying to teach crisis communication, and in that crisis communication, they're given too much information. They cannot assimilate all the information. They have a press conference that's coming on. And when the press conference comes, they suddenly get a notification that there's a potential anthrax outbreak on one of their ships. It's Carnival Cruise Line. And it is geared toward intentional low stakes failure. In other words, we all know we learn so much more from failure than we do success. And yet, just as you say, we hate failing. We hate it so much. But if you were to ask everyone, where do you learn the most? We would all say, I learned so much from failure. Let me ask you this, because I think you probably have a pretty good answer to this. How do we take failure from despair, shame, guilt to inspiration, motivation, get back up and get on with it?
First, I want to say this. Please invite me to your class. I'd love to be a part of that at some point in time. Please let me go through Zoom or whatever app, Riverside, so I can sit in your class. That sounds so much fun. Secondly, to answer your question, when you think about Christianity, we need Christ. We understand that it's by his grace and his mercy that we're able to make it each day. I think about men like Peter, where Paul had to withstand him to his face in Galatians chapter 2. That had to be a very rough moment for Peter. But that wasn't the first time where he experienced some very challenging situations where he had to be corrected. You think about what happened before Christ was crucified. So how did Peter, and I think Peter is a great example of this, and maybe even Peter and Judas, with you have two individuals where they're just going through something so monumental, so heartbreaking and disappointing, no doubt, for the both of them. I think we have to understand what the psalmist said, if I can remember correctly, in Psalm 4 and verse 8, you alone, O Lord. And having that kind of mindset, you alone, O Lord. I talk a lot about fitness, but I know that this strength, whatever physical strength I may have and that you may have one day, we're going to die. We're going to go back to the dust of the ground. And so we can't rely upon ourselves. We have to rely upon God. And when it comes to failures, and maybe it's not something with respect to sin, maybe it's something with someone starting a podcast. So a lot of people don't want to start like a podcast or a blog. What if no one listens? And the typical answer that we give people is, oh, of course people will listen and read. But the reality is not necessarily. No. I remember, Kenny, back in 2016, I got this stick shift. It was a Mazda B2500 1999 truck, a green truck. It was $1,500. It was unbelievable. It had 27,000 miles on it, and I had never driven stick shift before. In fact, I had great fear. And the more I thought about it, and I did a blog post called Overcoming Fear like with every gear or something like that. But I had no reason to be afraid. I don't know why I was ever afraid of driving a stick shift. I'd never driven one. I'd never had a bad experience with one. So maybe it was just this idea of failure. Yeah. And so I can remember I had all these doubts. What if I stall on a hill or in the middle of the street? And most people say those things won't happen. But all of my fears came true. I stalled in the middle of the road. I forgot what am I putting this in, 1 or 2? Like everything I thought, what if this happens? It actually happened. Yeah. But 28 days later, I'm driving. I don't have a care in the world. Right. So when you think about the challenges that a lot of people have, and I do think social media feeds the shame and the guilt and the fears and the what ifs and the anxiety, because you're on public display. Yeah. And you can understand this as well. I believe your communications, that's what you teach, right? So you think about public speaking. So public speaking, the fear that everybody has is, what if I mess up? And so they think so much about trying to say the perfect thing that eventually they mess up. So we just need to dive right into it. I think there's something with that as well.
I think one of the things that I talk about to my public speaking students is I tell them the same thing every semester, which is my job is to get you to stop listening to the voice in your head, because the voice in your head does not know enough to know whether you're going to do well at this or not. You have to get past your doubts. Public speaking is a skill. It's not a gift. So it's a muscle that you just begin flexing. And after a while, it becomes a skill you either enjoy or you don't. And you will decide whether you want to use it a lot. But if you never acquire the skill, you never have the opportunity.
And that's what you're talking about with failure. You have to be willing to give it a shot. And So many people today just don't want to try something, give it a shot.
Yeah.
It may not work. And if it doesn't work, it's okay because of what you said. You're going to learn something from it. Somehow you're going to get better.
Yeah. I think the other thing that I would say is, and see if you agree with this, Benjamin, you talked about spiritual failure. I think one of the things that I recognized, and I only started recognizing it when I was a parent, my children mess a lot of things up. They fail all the time. And I remember being in the same situation they were. And I don't know why I thought this, but for somehow in my head, I had equated failure with they're going to stop loving me. I don't know why I did, but I just kept on thinking, this is so bad, they could not love me anymore. And as a parent, I now think, how stupid is that? Do you know what you would have to do? I don't know what you could do to make me stop loving you. I think one of the things is we keep on thinking our salvation is somehow preconditioned on, boy, I just need to be good enough for God to love me. And the fact is, every time my kids come home, the door's open. There's a meal waiting for them. They're my children. As long as they keep on coming back home.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. It does, and it just hearing you speak made me think about, we started this study for parents. One of our elders is teaching this on Sunday afternoons, and yeah, as parents, we love our children. We go out of our way to show them this great love and affection, and it's hard. Parenting is not easy. So equate that with our Father in heaven. That's something, yeah, that's the point I wanted to make, where the family or the family dynamic, I think sometimes can help us with our relationship with God. When you think about our love with what you're saying with respect to your children, what could you do that I still wouldn't love you? Certainly you have expectations and you have certain things that you want them to accomplish. Well, when we think about the great love of our Father, that should give us great comfort that we can still return. That's what he wants us to do. He wants us to come back to him. And the more we can understand that, and that's something that the devil tries to deceive us with. You've messed up so bad. How could you ever return? But that's the lie of the devil. And we can come back to him, and he's willing to give us another chance. It's a powerful thought.
You've used the word balance a lot, and I completely agree. I think one of the things that you would probably both agree on is we have talked a lot about the spiritual side of our natures, and I think that's really important. But I think we also need to balance our mind and our body as well. I think, and you said this earlier on, God has given us a stewardship not just of our spirit. He has given us a stewardship of our responsibilities and our bodies. How does basically segmenting ourselves out really in the long run hurt us?
I guess that could lead to some imbalance at times. If you look at it from the physical standpoint, if that's the only thing, or if we're putting so much emphasis on that, we can miss out on what else is truly important. I think about some of the walks I've been doing in the morning time and how that's physically related. I'm outside, I'm moving. Our bodies are meant to move and to do things, to exert energy. But as I'm walking, I'm reminded about God, because I'm out in his creation. And when I see the sunrise, I think about Psalm 19. We went to the beach for vacation last month, and I think just listening to the waves and seeing their power, I think about the book of Job when God speaks to Job, and where were you when I established all these things? So it's interesting how you have this whole connection where something as easy as just getting outside in nature, you're going to be reminded, and hopefully our minds do turn to God. I think it all goes hand in hand. I think sometimes the challenge when we start talking about faith and fitness, that people have to do so much every day with their bodies and things like that. I'm not saying that necessarily, but I do think there is this connection.
It's important for us to intentionally choose the values that we want to live. If we don't choose those values, people will be happy to choose values for you. We live in a culture that often tries to get us to adopt a consumer mindset. In other words, we're valuable just because we buy stuff. How does a Christian battle that mindset?
I think we need to understand, who are we listening to more? I think certainly we need to be
Yes.
in the Word of God on a consistent basis. I know we've heard all the things about not always being on Facebook, but being in the book. But I do think social media plays a big part of this, where it can drive the comparison game.
Yeah.
It can drive the consumer game. We are Christians. We are in Christ, and what great blessings we have. So understanding our value from that perspective and what we're a part of. We're a part of a kingdom that can never be destroyed.
Yeah.
When we take our time to be intentional, and I think those two words, be intentional with understanding who we're listening to, how we're measuring success, where we're really trying to get our value, that changes everything. If we're not intentional, you're exactly right. People will set our schedule, set our values. The devil is involved with spiritual identity theft, where he wants to give us a whole new identity. And sadly, sometimes we can allow that to happen. And so we need to listen, need to be listening to our God. And so I think that's how we can really stay on the right course. What is truly valuable? It requires us being intentional every day. Where, okay, this is really valuable. And I think, Kenny, we can see sometimes, and sometimes this may be hard to admit, but we can look back at our schedule in a week and we can see, oh, maybe work was more valuable to me this week. Maybe checking out and watching TV was more valuable because I did it for 20 hours this week. Sometimes we can blame other people, but we have to look at, okay, what actually am I doing? And that goes back to staying in today. Okay, what can I get done today? Where is my focus today? So you're right. There is a lot of consumerism out there. And again, think about this. There's so much out there with respect to how we look, what we wear, billion-dollar industries with supplements, makeup. So there's such an emphasis, and we lose sight of what truly is it all about. And I talk about this sometimes with even the scale. When you think about weight, right? The scale can either ruin our day or it can make our day. If we see a good number, I feel pretty good about myself. That's not where we find our value. It's not about some 3-digit number, whether it's the scale or our FICO score or our retirement fund. It's who we are in Jesus Christ. That's what it's all about.
I'm not sure if you remember if you've ever heard this old Billy Graham quote, but he said, "Give me 5 minutes with somebody's checkbook and I'll tell you where their heart is." The beautiful thing about the phone is it's giving you a lot of information that you didn't know was being tracked. Your phone will tell you how many steps you took today. And that number, if you look for that number, you can be shocked by it or you can be motivated by it. It will also tell you where you drove your car today. It will also tell you how much time you spent at a certain place. The phone will also have an app on there that will show you how much you spent at that certain place. Your phone is a great window into your value system because it will tell you what's important to you. And if there's a disconnect between what you say is important and what your actions are showing, maybe that's an important thing for you to recognize.
Yeah, and let me say this too. I think I'm not trying to say either that unless you're spending 5 hours studying the scriptures or something like that, then you're missing out. Because sometimes people draw that conclusion of, I understand we have to work. I understand we have careers and we have families and we have down days and bad days and good days and all kinds of days. But the disposition, the attitude we have towards seeking first things first, seeking first the kingdom and seeking what true growth or the growth that we ultimately should be going after, that should drive everything else. Balance too, it doesn't always necessarily mean like a 50-50. No. There are times, this as a professor, you may have to work 5 or 10 extra hours in a week. That's okay. And then a month later or 2 weeks later, maybe you have more time for your family. So it's not saying that everything has to be perfectly balanced every day, but there should be this mindset of, okay, what are my priorities? What is the one thing? And when we get those things done, then that changes everything. But yeah, I think it's interesting too with, and it's something very hard to do, Kenny. I don't know if you've experienced this, but really being upfront and honest with ourselves, man, what's happening here? and looking at what you're saying, the data, right? So it can be with our finances. Well, I make this much money every month.
Right.
Where is it going? Or why don't my pants in my closet fit me anymore? What
Right.
has happened?
Right.
So we have to be upfront and honest with ourselves with all.
In your podcast, you talk a lot about mindset. And by the way, your podcast is I Can Do. It's an excellent podcast, and I highly recommend it.
Thank you.
Define mindset for us, and how does that and why does that affect us how it does?
When I talk about mindset, what I'm typically referring to is how we view maybe the day or the situation, our circumstances. So one can have a mindset or attitude of they're always complaining about something.
Yeah.
I've been guilty of that. Or we can find things to complain about. We can find things to get in the way of what we actually can do. So mindset became even more important for me after getting my defibrillator in 2010. And I think maybe that's a great example to demonstrate this, where on one hand, it was a very devastating blow because I'm 30. I can't do certain things, or at least I'm not recommended to do certain things the way that I used to. What's my wife going to think now that I have this scar and this piece of metal in my chest? What if it doesn't work? What if I mess up? What if I break it? I had to wait 6 weeks before I could do any exercise. And that first day when I was able to go out, I jogged and I fell and I was like, oh no, I think I just ruined this $80,000 piece of equipment. But I was missing out, Kenny, on what if I changed my mindset, how I looked at this. I was blessed to have insurance to pay for the majority of it. I have this in case something does happen, that this gives me a chance to continue to live. Not everybody has access to this. The surgery actually went well. Maybe I can use this to encourage other people. So when I think about mindset, I think about it from that perspective at times. Are we grateful for what we do have? Do we have a mind or heart of contentment? So that's what I mean by mindset of how are we going to look at things? I'm not always doing that the right way. So I'm not saying that I have it all figured out by any stretch of the imagination, but it does help us with perspective. Not everybody can work out. There are so many reasons for us to be grateful and thankful and content. And so that mindset will help us to really appreciate what God has given us. And so that's what I think I'm driving at when I talk about mindset. If you have something to do, you have the time, get it done. Invest it so your future self will be happy. That's what I mean. Okay, so get the excuses out of the way. Because more often or not, there's no one else holding us back. It's just me.
I think one of the things that you're really talking about is not only defining success, but also measuring success. I think prayer and gratitude is something that changes us. It doesn't change God as much as it changes us. I have heard people say, as a criticism of Christianity, why does God need you to thank him all the time? Is God that insecure? Is God that narcissistic? If you serve such a fragile God, what is he going to do when something actually goes wrong? You're missing the whole point. Why is it important that we adopt a mindset of being grateful to God, to those around us? Why is that an important thing for us to learn?
Having a heart of gratitude changes everything. How can we learn to be content?
Yeah.
And it is a learned behavior. Philippians chapter 4, there are things that we need to learn. I think through prayer, I think through gratitude, all of these things will certainly help us with this heart of contentment. And I'll say this too, Kenny. Colossians 2 and verse 7, we have so many reasons to be grateful and to praise God. But think about this, Kenny. People in the world are searching for everything that we have in Christ.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we just fail to see. And that kind of goes back to your question on where our values come in or who's influencing us. We have everything we need. And yet sometimes we're lacking. And we're just not tapping into the sources where our power and strength comes from as much as we should.
Yeah, I think about the opposite of gratitude a lot, which in my mind is entitlement. And in what culture is ingratitude and entitlement a virtue? One of the things God says over and over is, I'm giving you grace because if I gave you what you deserved, you wouldn't be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't you think that would change how we view every day? Again, if we start off every day with this way, that's success. A heart of
Yeah.
contentment, of I don't have to compare myself to someone else on social media. I don't have to chase after all these things just so people will recognize me. I have this relationship with God. I have my faith in Christ, and I'm saved by his blood. That changes everything. Changes everything. That should change, I think, how we start each day and maybe how we define success. And not to say that we have KPIs and SMART goals and everything else like that. We need to have those kinds of things in life. But the bigger picture, that should modify and that should help us with the perspective of all of those other things, with everything you just said.
Benjamin, what did I miss?
That's a great question. I don't know. I don't think anything. We've talked a lot, and I've really appreciated this opportunity to talk to you. I would like to mention real quickly here, we did talk a lot about me being a preacher, and I created a website called preacherhealth.com. And this website is really designed to provide resources to preachers. Well, because it's important, because preachers need it. It's important because I've experienced everything that's on my website. When you think about being a preacher, we've talked about health. Health is important. It's not everything, but there is some value in being healthy. It's important to demonstrate, I think, discipline. It's important, which I think will help us with our mindset. It will give us the necessary energy. So on the preacherhealth.com, it's not all about fitness, but I do talk a little bit about that. But I think the website is important because for me and for many other preachers, and I guess you could say for entrepreneurs, finding things like health insurance, for example. So when I was with Pfizer, I had it really good. I paid $100 a month, top-notch health insurance, $80,000 defibrillator. I think maybe I paid $1,000 out of pocket. That was some good health insurance. I don't have that same kind of health insurance. So I try to provide, and I do provide, resources. Okay, here's an option of where you can find some health insurance. That gets very challenging, and I think that actually leads to different health issues as well. Preachers, their wives, sometimes they don't have money to get the necessary blood work, to see the physicians that they need to. And so that adds stress. And so I want to provide a website that preachers can turn to for resources, whether it's health insurance, exercise, nutrition, just different ways, different things that preachers sometimes need. Money, for example.
Yes.
Our budget, organizational tools. So I like to recommend Michael Hyatt's Full Focus Planner. I've been using that for the past 3 years, and that's changed how I use or schedule my days and my weeks. And so resources that will help preachers with their health, not just physical health, really trying to touch on a lot of different areas in their lives. So I just wanted to mention that, and my other website, benjaminlee.blog, where you can find podcasts and blogs and other resources as well. But I think we've touched on a lot, and I really appreciate this opportunity.
This has been really helpful for me. I really appreciate your take on a lot of these things. I think you've got a lot on the ball here. Your coaching business is also an important work for people who need to basically get accountability to make sure that they're getting stuff done that needs to get done. So I think all of those are really important things.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Kenny. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you. I end all of my podcasts with be good and do good. What is good?
I will say what my preacher in Rockford would always say at the beginning of his sermons. God is good, not just some of the time, but all the time. God is good.
I love that. Benjamin, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, how could they do that?
Yeah, you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on my website, benjaminlee.blog. Mm-hmm. And you can also find me on preacherhealth.com.
That sounds great. Thank you so much for doing this, man.
Thank you, Kenny.
That was a helpful conversation for me. Thank you, Benjamin, for doing what you do. I'm thrilled to know you and am inspired by what you're doing. As for the good thing I'm thinking about, I'm grateful for simple pleasures. This morning, my wife left the house dressed as a can of Play-Doh. As a kindergarten teacher, she often has to do some odd things for a school function, but as she left the house, her outfit made me smile. I remember being a kid and making things with Lego and Play-Doh. I am definitely a high-tech guy, but I always appreciate these simple pleasures. I want to again thank those who financially support the podcast, like Jerry Wright, George Sanchez, Chris Kramer, Kevin Hansen, Barbara McWayne, and my parents. If you'd like to support the podcast as well, please look me up on Patreon. I'd very much appreciate it. Next week, I plan to release a conversation I had with Saif Al-Safir. Saif converted from Islam and has an amazing story. I loved that conversation. So until then, let's be good and do good.